Unless we build it now. United States, Africa, we salute ya. A new state of mind, I introduce ya. Close your eyes and visualize the rise of a new paradigm. Solar powered skyscrapers.
Welcome to the Africa Must Unite podcast, a podcast dedicated to inspiring African people worldwide to rise up, organize, and struggle for Pan-Africanism, a unified, liberated, socialist Africa, the only permanent solution to the exploitation and oppression of African people, no matter where they happen to be born or happen to live in the world. Now please, welcome the hosts of Africa Must Unite.
Africa's future is now, so get ready.
Greetings, I'm Brother Neil.
And I'm Brother Maurice.
This is Africa Must Unite podcast, and we are the Pan-African Revolutionary Socialist Party.
Okay, Neil, I want to go over a couple of dates from the calendar for the month of February. The first date is on February 1st, when the first African Week was launched by Carter G. Woodson, celebrated in 1926. Also on February 4th, we have one of our mothers of the so-called civil rights movement, Rosa Parks, was born in 1913. Lastly, on February 24th, 1966, our leader, the revolutionary Pan-Africanist Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, his government was overthrown by capitalist imperialists on that date of February 24th. This concludes the dates that I wanted to share, Neil, for the month of February.
Well, thank you so much, Brother Maurice. This is, this month of February is chock full of dates, so we ask our listeners to sort of look at the calendar and read along with us as we go throughout the program, if you have calendars. Now, I'm going to read from the calendar this month's theme and the discussion of this month's theme, which is also on the calendar. The theme for this month, February, is the dialectical relationship between the decaying capitalist and imperialist world and the emergence of a unified socialist Africa. And the calendar reads as thus: today's capitalist system is becoming increasingly concentrated, with more and more wealth going into the hands of fewer and fewer people. Wealth dependent on the rich natural resources of Africa. A 2022 report by Inequality Lab points out that we are now living in one of the greatest periods of concentration of wealth in the history of the world, with the greatest shares of new wealth going to the top 1/10 of 1% of the world's population. This means that we live in a world in which everything is commodified, nothing is sacred, everything is for sale. This increasing concentration of wealth and the disunification of Africa, the richest land base in the world, is why we see tent cities of homeless people all across the richest country in the world, where African people make up 40% of the homeless population. This is why we see Africans risking their lives in leaky boats trying to get from Africa to Europe, or Haitians in similar leaky boats trying to get to the U.S. This increased concentration of wealth, as we know from history, leads to war, as imperialists begin to fight over the raw materials, most of which are found in Africa, that they need to feed their constantly expanding economy. However, intense concentration creates conditions that heighten opportunities for revolutionary change. Increased concentration of wealth at this level leads to three things: A, economic depression. B, world war as imperialists begin to violently compete for the world's wealth, and and uh, and capitalists then C, create fascist movements to protect themselves as the masses of people begin to organize to resist. Progressive and revolutionary forces must then begin to unite if they want to succeed. Remember that the first modern socialist revolution emerged from World War One. Then the second modern socialist revolution emerged in World War II, along with the independence from colonialism in Africa, Asia, and the Caribbean. This next period of World War will see the emergence of a unified socialist Africa. Today, Africa, the richest land base in the world, is the weakest link in the capitalist chain. That is, it has the least commodified land, investment, industrialization, etc. But our lack of control is coming to an end. But their lack of control is coming to an end. Africa is on the brink of establishing a unified socialist Africa and opening a new chapter in world history. So what we see from this discussion is that there is a contradiction that is brewing into a critical point where there will be an engagement across the global African world against this system of neocolonialism, imperialism, and capitalism.
Wow. Thank you, Neil, for sharing this incredible information. But brother Neil, I have a question. When we talk about this term dialectical relationship, I want to ask you two questions. What can you explain what is a dialectical relationship, and what is and how does dialectical relationship or moreover, what is the dialectical relationship between capitalism and African people?
Well, basically that term dialectical refers to the reality that when we look into a situation, or we look into reality, including a social reality, we can always see contending forces. This is what we call the unity of opposites within any reality, especially a social reality. We're going to see the contending forces that are engaged with each other that make up that system and give that system its reality. So let me give you an example. So we live in a system which we call capitalism, where you have a very small, tiny group of people who control the world's wealth, and they have the rest of the world working for them in one way or the other.
Right.
That system of capitalism itself was born out of many things, but the key thing that was born out of was slavery, the enslavement of our people worldwide. Exactly. And so as we enter into this system of capitalism, I'm talking as African people, and we say all of our people, no matter where we come from, we are African. We come from the continent of Africa itself, or we in South America, or we in the Caribbean, or we in the U.S. or Europe, or Middle East, or wherever. We come from that African reality. And by and large, we were locked into this system of slavery. So as we come into that system of capitalism, we're not just coming as individual, let's say, black people, but we're coming in there as people who are part of this process of enslavement that created the system. So we are locked into this contradiction, whether we want it or not. And inside of this system, we are fighting. We cannot get free inside of this system as long as the system remains what it is. I mean, we can neaten it up a little bit, paint up a few walls here and there, but the system itself, this rotten system itself, has to be totally transformed, and that comes through this clash of contradictions. Now, so when we look at these Africans in this system, one of the things that we need to have is a sort of political consciousness so that we can see clearly what the situation that it is that we're in. This is what we call political consciousness or ideological consciousness. This is one of the jobs of our movement and other revolutionary movements, is to help people see as clearly as possible what the situation is and where their true interests are in terms of the system. Not only are we trying to understand what the concrete situation is, but in Crumist dialectics, we are not only trying to negate the negative. We're not just trying to get rid of capitalism, although that's a key task. We're not just simply trying to get rid of neo-colonialism and domestic colonialism in this country. We are African people in this country are a colony. We're not merely second-class citizens. We're not merely somehow black folks who are striving every day to become better Americans or something like that to get more. We are a domestic colony, and as a domestic colony, we have to struggle for true liberation. And as Pan-Africanists and Crumist, we see that as tied totally or linked in totally with the struggles that are going on the continent and with other Africans around the world, but especially on the continent. So we are trying to negate neo-colonialism. We're trying to negate domestic colonialism. We're trying to negate imperialism. We're trying to negate capitalism. We're trying to get rid of these things. But at the same time, we have to also have a focus on what it is that we are trying to build. What is the in Crumist dialectics? We always keep a look at the positive. What are we building in its place? Because if we don't keep that in our uppermost minds, consciousness, and day-to-day practice and activity, that means that we can get waylaid and get move off the track in terms of where we are trying to go. So those, I think, are what we mean by this dialectical relationship, that as African people, we're tied up into this whole process of capitalism and its creation, but we were tied into it throughout this process of slavery, and those relationships, some of them still remain, the coercion and so forth that comes with slavery, the very deadly way that we're dealt with by the state, that is the police forces and the armies and so forth that we see all that kill us in a minute. All of that are leftovers or from that slave enslavement period. And so we are in a period now where because of this high concentration of wealth that the calendar mentioned, we're in the system is coming into a crisis position, and these contradictions are doing what we call ripening, and it's making way, if we do the right work, for something new to emerge.
Wow, Neil, I have to admit, all of this sounds good. It sounds great, but can you give examples, more critical examples of what is happening today, right now?
Okay, let's look at some things. For instance, right now today, we just had a inauguration of a new president of the United States.
Right.
And in the place where usually the what do you call those people, the Congress sits, and where the Supreme Court usually sits, they didn't have any of those people sitting there. They had all these billionaires from these high-tech companies sitting there. And we have a situation now where the high-tech businesses now control 1/3 of all of the kind of wealth inside of the United States, and a huge amount of wealth around the world. Just about 6 or 7 companies. So now you have this great concentration, and although we talk about these things as tech companies, basically they're another form of finance capital. Right. So the old capitalism, where you're just building cars in the factory and so forth, that's been superseded by finance, who controls the money and who controls the the circulation of money in the world, and also of the goods themselves. And now it's gotten to a point where that finance is not just between banks and so forth. Everything we do is financialized. So nowadays, people don't pay with cash anymore. They pay everything they pay with credit cards. So everything you're paying is through every time you make a payment. Back in the day, if you went to a store and you bought a can of beans or whatever you buy, or maybe a shirt, you left the store. You give them your couple of dollars or whatever. You got to take your shirt or your beans and you walk out, and that's the end of that relationship. But when you put that on your credit card, that relationship goes on and on and on and on. When you go on the internet, they buy and sell pieces out of us all over the world. You see, and there's so you go on and every time you go on, something about you is being sold to other people who are buying and selling. So there's a never-ending thing like that. Now, our movement, there's also an ideological aspect to this thing. Our movement, when we kind of emerged in the 70s, and we said ideology is so important, it's so important, and people say, oh, you're being, some people on the left say, this ideology thing, you're overdoing it. But now we see the richest man in the world, this guy Musk, by almost $500 billion. He wants to be the first trillionaire in the world. He also owns something that he calls X. He used to call it Twitter. And on there, he has, I think, I forget, 200 million or 200, I don't know, so many, he has the greatest Twitter following of anybody in the world. He's the biggest influencer in the world. So not only is he the richest person in the world, but he is ideologically influencing people all over the world more than any one single person. And so that ideology is also wound up into this new system, or this newly emergent system of where capitalism is today. Now, as these high-tech folks, what do they need? Well, we need coltan. Where's it coming from? East Africa or Central Africa, from the Congo. And what's happening? Thousands and tens of thousands of people dying now as people are fighting, some in the interest of imperialism, killing our folks in the Congo so they can get that coltan, and they're getting it dirt cheap. And without that coltan, you don't operate cell phones, you don't operate these computers.
The weapons.
And the weapons. And so you come, and you also have all sorts of other weapons. There's a mountain full of iridium in Haiti, a mountain of it. It's more valuable than gold, much more valuable than gold. And you need that. That's needed for modern weaponry and missiles and stuff like that. So we're in this situation where they're coming in there to get this stuff, and they don't mind killing and raping and abusing people in the worst way possible in order to get it at dirt cheap prices. So what's happening right now in terms of world conflict that's emerging from this thing, 1/8 out of all the world's people are feeling some of this conflict. They live in conflict zones. That's 12% of the world's, 12.5%, almost 13% of the world's population living in some conflict zone. And if we begin to take that and say, only look at the global south, that is the former colonized world, that number goes up. And we look at only at Africa, it even goes up again even more. So that conflict is on all over the world. People killed in these conflict zones in 2024, that number of people killed in these conflict zones rose by 30% over the people were killed in conflict zones only 1 year ago in 2023. And 2023 itself represented an increase over 2022. So this conflict is emergent more and more. The level of conflict around the world has more than doubled in the past 5 years. And this conflict is not only increasing in the global south, but it's also now going to pull in the European, the big powers more and more. So, people are talking about, you read your mainstream media, and they'll say things like, oh, we're on the way to a new Third World War or another Cold War, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But the World War is already on. You have regional wars that just haven't completely, excuse me, they haven't completely connected all of the dots. So this is what's going on. At the same time, on the other side of the equation, there is an increase in solidarity and collaboration in the global African world and in other arenas of struggle. And I'll just give you some examples of that, Brother Maurice. For instance, remember the Black Lives Matter movement when George Floyd's death and when his lynching was sent out all around the world? Our brothers and sisters marched on U.S. embassies all over the African world, all over, especially in Africa, they marched.
Yes, right.
And in the European capitals, they were marching. And the Europeans themselves were marching in these various places, including the U.S. There was increasing solidarity, the beginning levels of the solidarity. In the Sahel, where we begin to see countries, especially Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, not only begin to kick out the French neocolonialists, also beginning to kick out the American neocolonialists, and that's the negation. That's the beginning of the negation. But on the positive side, they also formed their own AES. They formed their own unity, their own organization of unity. So they were moving and beginning to speak now in more Pan-African terms. We also see in Brazil the movement of landless people. These are primarily African people and some indigenous people, but primarily African people. They are landless. It's a movement that consists of a number of different organizations on the ground that have come together and said, hey, we are the lowest, we are the poorest of the poor. We are the lowest on the totem pole, but we're going to organize ourselves and we're going to and in this organization, we understand ourselves to be part of a global movement. It's interesting to note that in Brazil, Africans in Brazil are starting to go. Some of them going to Benin also open, like Ghana. Benin opened up and say, "Come on in," and so forth. Come back home, and so a lot of people from Brazil, Africans in Brazil, starting to go back to Benin, and this return of what I call the old diaspora, because we have the old diaspora, the diaspora which was brought over to the Western Hemisphere by way of enslavement. The new diaspora of Africans are the Africans who've come in here. They might have been here a generation or so, who've come here as a result of these largely because of neo-colonial wars and so forth, and oppression, and have come in here and are here. But in the old diaspora, people are beginning to look toward Africa, and things are getting hot here. They say, "Oh man, maybe we white folks talking about going to Canada, Africans talking about going to Ghana and Benin, or some going to Zambia from this area here." But we are, and people will say, "Hey, maybe it's time to think about home." People who might have not even listened to what we are saying 4 or 5 years, even 10, 20 years ago, are now coming to their own conclusions. And then there's a response to the crisis in the Congo, in Eastern Congo, but Congo overall. More people have died in the Congo since the end of the what we call World War II, the Second Imperialist War, than in any other place in the world. And that is because of what? The Congo has all of these things that they need.
Uranium.
Uranium that went to blow up Japan, that only nuclear bomb that's been dropped anywhere in the world was dropped by the United States on an Asian country, Japan, and that uranium came out of the Congo. So all these things that people need now, lithium for the batteries that they say they want to have for a better economy, a better environment, and all this kind of stuff. The coltan and other things they need for our cell phones to all go on. The cobalt for the medical work. All of this stuff is in the Congo. And they also know that the Congo, not just in terms of minerals and material like that, but it's also strategically important. It's the center, the heart of Africa, and if the Congo is stable and it unites and you have unification with the rest of its neighbors, that means it can link the rest of Africa. That's why Kwame Nkrumah, the person that we follow, said that he wanted the capital of Africa, of a unified socialist Africa, to be in the Congo.
Yeah.
And even for Africans in the United States, one of the things we got to understand is that 1 out of every 5 Africans in the United States came from that region of Africa.
And don't leave out, not to interrupt, but don't leave out what Lumumba said, Patrice Lumumba said to Africans here in America.
Oh, yeah. Patrice Lumumba said, hey, when in the 60s and late 50s when we were fighting this and that, hey, Lumumba said, hey, man, forget about it. If we get this thing going like we want to go, we can bring all of y'all home. We got plenty of room for y'all in the Congo. He said, back then it was like 20 million, 17 million, something like that. He said, we got room for all of y'all here. And he said, he made a poem even before when he was becoming. He gave a poem that looked at this question of enslavement to his African brothers and sisters, and he talked about us struggling to overcome it.
Right.
So so we had these leaders; they all had to be wiped out. When the Americans, along with the Belgians and the French and the British, but the Americans leading the operation, when they killed Lumumba, they threw him in a vat of acid so there'll be nothing left for Africans to remember him by, but Africans remember him every day.
And you know what? Yeah, real quick.
One tooth that was left over, and they found that, and they brought that back, and that has sparked unification movements.
And I just want to connect it to Malcolm real quick, because we're coming on the anniversary of his assassination on the 21st of February. And I just want to state real quick to connect to with Malcolm X. He had a quote one time about saying that Patrice Lumumba was the greatest man. What he said, the greatest man to ever walk Africa, if I understand it correctly. And not too long after he made that statement, that's when that assassination took place, right?
Well, it's not just that statement, and Malcolm also said something that's also important. Malcolm said in his last message, that speech that he gave to Africans in Detroit 2 weeks before he was assassinated, he said, if you don't understand what's going on in the Congo, you can't understand what's going on in Mississippi. And basically, he was not just talking about the Congo. He was just saying, if you don't understand what's going on in Africa, but especially in the Congo, but you don't understand what's happening in the U.S., and because it's linked. Now, there was, and the thing that got.
Okay, Neil, So
let me just finish. Like that, Malcolm had a meeting with Nkrumah, and he was about to do the thing in the United States that was going to connect with what was going on in Africa. That's when he got wiped out. So, we are in this thing together, and we have to keep taking it to a higher level.
Neil, all of this sounds good. The last points when you speak about the positive, right? What do we need to do? But we are in with like all of the information you had, the devastating information you share. We are in an African state of emergency when you talk about 40% of African people being homeless. Here.
No, not 40% of African people homeless. 40% of the homeless are African.
Yeah, 40. Yeah, thank you for that correction. And then also hundreds of women, African women, is being set on fire, put to death in the Congo, and this fastest movement with Trump. What is the solution? What is the urgent solution to get us out of this hellhole of where we find ourselves at right now as African people?
Well, I'm not gonna take a lot of time. I'll just be very succinct and quick. As Nkrumah said, forward ever. Number one, bring together all of the positive forces. That is, build the All-African Committee for Political Coordination. We don't have to call it that, or what he called the AACPC. So we need to build that, and build some similar things in our local areas and so forth on the continent, worldwide, build that thing. Two, we have to deepen our connection with the masses, especially in the countryside, or including in the countryside. That is, oftentimes we have done some of this ideological work. Now we have to merge ourselves with the masses of our people. Three, we have to fight for what Nkrumah calls the critical dialectical unity within the three Africas. What he's saying is that there was an Africa, a communal Africa, with communal land relations and so forth, and we had certain religious ideas, spiritual ideas. Then we see later coming Islamic Africa, which also accompanied sometimes the emergence of feudalism in parts of Africa. And then lastly, we see the Christians come and they bring, along with them, capitalism. What we have to do is carve out. Come say we're not going to get rid of, we're going to always have, we're not necessarily always, but there are Muslims here, there are Christians here. We have to win all of them to the Pan-African Revolution. And win all of them to the Pan-African Revolution, basing it, however, on those values that come from the communal Africa, and which today would be expressed in a movement towards socialism and unification in Africa beyond ethnic group and beyond micro-national, these various little countries here and there. Fourthly, we have to build the organizing capacity of African workers and peasants worldwide. That is, we have to work and build, help African workers to build and self-organize, peasantry, rural workers, and so forth, build and unify and do that political conscience where people don't see themselves just as part of a local thing. They see themselves as something worldwide. So I think these four things are what we need to do, Brother Maurice.
Yeah. These are very critical and very, very important. And we need to, if we not, I know we already, us as Nkrumah's been working on this, but it's more than ever, the masses of African people, we have to get going as a whole. All throughout 2025, at times with invited guests, our focus has been on the 2025 theme of our calendar, a unified socialist Africa, and not only coming, but as we had laid out right now from Brother Neil, it is on the horizon. So join us next month when we will discuss the masses are the makers of history. Meanwhile, you all can visit our website, Pan-African Revolutionary Socialist Party.org. And I give it again, Pan-African Revolutionary Socialist.org. Email us at panafricanrsp@gmail.com. Also, you can like us on SoundCloud.com, where we have some of our previous shows listed on that website. And you can also visit us on YouTube.
Remember, organization is the key. Join us, the Pan-African Revolutionary Socialist Party, or some other revolutionary Pan-African socialist organization. A union of African socialist states is on the horizon.
Pan-African lifestyle, Africa unite, unite, Africa unite, unite, stand up and fight, fight, now is the time, it's right, Africa stand up and fight. Them say no to colonialism, tribalism, colorism, and any other ism. We done the quiet for too long. 400 years of pain, we still dey strong. While the West they chop our wealth, land minerals them want take our health. But we no go keep silent again. Not time to shine, not time to reign. Africa unite, unite, stand up and fight, fight. Now is the time, it's right. Africa stand up and fight. Some they live in Africa but them no like us. Claims that them be African but them no like us. Real recognize real, we know the bonds. Rise up for our Kubulon. Real recognize real, no fakes. We they build the future, make no mistakes. Stand up and fight for Africa in the motherland and the diaspora. We must unite for Africa, Mama Africa. No go be prisoner for your own land. You know the game, who they hold command. Trust your blessings, full your hand. Oil for your head, make you stand over stand. Africa unite, unite, stand up and fight, fight. Now is the time, it's right. Africa stand up and fight. Africa unite, Africa unite, Africa unite. In the motherland and the diaspora, Africa unite, Africa unite, unite, stand up and fight, fight. Now is the time, it's right. Africa stand up and fight.